Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Shroud of Khanduras, which is a new unique item that was added in patch 1.5.0, I believe. And this particular item is pretty darn OP, especially if you utilize it properly, because it offers some crazy effects. And let's go over some of these crazy effects and talk about them. First off is Evade grants 17% movement speed for 1.5 seconds. This is going to obviously give you an increase in your movement speed. It's not really the most amazing thing in the world, but because the item is based around evades, it actually kind of makes sense, and we'll talk about that later. But it does go up as high as 25% increase to movement speed. It also gives us a 57 to 75% non-physical damage, which is pretty darn nice. And that non-physical damage is going to apply obviously to fire, ice, lightning, poison, shadow, etc. On top of that, it also gives us a bonus to shadow resistance, which I don't think anybody really cares about for the most part. But it could be useful if you're struggling on resistances. Most people are not struggling on resistances these days. On top of this, it also gives +3 to Dark Shroud, and Dark Shroud, when you get ranks in it, does enhance some of the effects, like, for instance, the damage reduction. Let's go ahead and pull this up real quick. So when you're looking at Dark Shroud, notice it says that you gain 8% damage reduction per active shadow, and when you put this on, you're going to get a 9.2% damage reduction per active shadow, and of course there's 5 active shadows. When you take damage, they do get removed, and so it can reduce the amount of damage reduction that you're getting, but it's certainly not a terrible armor or way to get damage reduction at all. On top of this, we also get the casting Dark Shroud makes you immune for 2 seconds, but your evade cooldown has been increased by 9 to 3 seconds. Also, evading while Dark Shroud is active leaves behind an explosion that deals 36,090 damage and pulls enemies in, which is pretty freaking interesting, right? Well, the armor has some very interesting connotations because, first off, it does give you an explosion when you evade, which is not really what you're like desperately looking for or anything, but the explosion is there, and so you're getting something when you evade every single time. The real meat and potatoes of this comes down to the free immunity, and I'm going to show you when you cast a Dark Shroud, you become immune, essentially. Now, immunity is more than just simply unstoppable. It basically makes it so that your character cannot be damaged during that particular time period. So while you have your Dark Shroud active, but it's only for 2 seconds, and you might think, well, that's not really that good. 2 seconds isn't really the most amazing, right? But I'm gonna go, but if you can reset the Dark Shroud cooldown quickly enough, you can basically become immune almost permanently for the most part, and I'm gonna show you guys how. So first off, with this particular build, we're using the preparation specialization, which allows us to reset all of our cooldowns by using our ultimate. We're also set up specifically to spam our ultimate. In other words, all we have to do is hold down our button, and we can activate the ultimate cooldown as many times as we want to. Notice, we can literally make the ultimate literally reset in seconds, which means that whenever I use my Dark Shroud, I'm now immune for 2 seconds, and I can instantly reset Dark Shroud anytime I want to by simply using my ultimate ability, pretty much maintaining permanent immunity. Although there is a slight lag time in this, because of course of the way that the ability works, is it puts the immunity on for the 2 seconds, waits until the 2 seconds are up, and then activates the cooldown, which means that I have to then activate the Rain of Arrows after the cooldown has finished, and then press the button. And it's actually a lot easier than it would seem, because you pretty much are just doing this in sequence, and keeping that permanent unstoppable and immunity up basically at all times. It's not really that hard to do. And there's a lot of potential builds that could keep this immunity up pretty much forever. On top of this, you also get some pretty good heals from Dark Shroud as well. So if you're taking damage and your Dark Shroud pips are getting removed, the Dark Shroud did get a nice buff where it heals you for 10% of your maximum life when your Dark Shroud pips are removed. And it just seems like a very tanky and very defensive armor. Obviously, it can add in a way for you to become unstoppable and also immune to basically all damage. Now, immunity is a very tricky thing because it works kind of oddly comparatively to unstoppable. So unstoppable doesn't like prevent you from taking damage. Immunity does. During the duration of immunity, your character basically cannot take damage during that particular time period. And this means that you can essentially just maintain your life. Now, I have tested out some things about immunity to kind of play around with some of this stuff. And like in the patch where the sorceress had permanent immunity, I was trying to find a way to kill her in the PvP zone, which I thought was pretty hilarious. And what I found out was is that damage over time effects and things that are applied to you before you become immune will still be active after your immunity ends. So do keep in mind that damage over time effects are not going to be canceled out by immunity. However, if a damage over time effect is applied to you when you are immune, it will not continue after the immunity has ended because the immunity prevents the damage over time effect from being applied. However, it does not clear off damage over time effects that have already been applied before the immunity has been activated. And since you can't keep it up with 100% uptime, but it's near 100% uptime, there probably will be things that will slip through the cracks of it. But of course, having permanent unstoppable and immunity at basically at your fingertips with a build like this is certainly not terrible. And if you stack points into Dark Shroud, obviously you can max that out. You can get the additional points, hopefully maybe even grab like a greater affix on the Dark Shroud itself, which would be really nice for this particular piece of armor. Getting that probably to maybe even as high as like +6, and getting more Dark Shroud ranks for more damage reduction. Of course, if you're going to use this armor, you're not going to be able to use Tyraels, and you might be in a position where your resistances might actually be suffering at that point, and you might actually need to utilize your jewelry slots for the first time ever. It's actually kind of funny because ever since Tyraels came out, I just throw this on and I just forget about my resistances. But this is good enough to maybe tempt you away from Tyraels, especially if you had some decent greater affixes on here, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of hard to turn down permanent immunity, and immunity basically means you're not going to be taking any damage. The only downside, of course, is that if all your Dark Shroud ranks disappear, and obviously you can't trigger your immunity for some reason, it could be an issue.
Mr. Goody Two Shoes, Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Ginger Evil Mentor here. Why bother farming when you can go to MMOEXP.com and simply purchase your items in gold? GGM would have you farm the items. What a pathetic being. Use code GEM Ginger Evil Mentor for 6% off your entire purchase. And don't tell Ginger Gaming Mentor that I was here.
Mm-hmm. Dark Shroud is also a subterfuge skill, so it's also important to talk about this in terms of that reason. So setting up to spam Dark Shroud also potentially means that you could get other effects, like for instance, the new Umbacrux, which is a really nice weapon, creates the Shade Totem by obviously using your subterfuge skill. So when you use your Dark Shroud, if you set up for spamming it, you're going to be able to spam your Shade Totem as well. Also, the Writhing Band of Trickery also creates its decoy trap through the subterfuge skills. So again, spamming your Dark Shroud is also going to spam your decoy trap. And there's definitely some very interesting things here that synergize with the way that the Shroud of Khanduras works. And I think that it's just a really powerful item in general. The flavor text on the Shroud of Khanduras was actually written by Deckard Cain, which is really interesting. In fairer times, the Emperor gifted Prince Idan a gilded shroud. Still a boy, not yet full height, it dwarfed poor Idan. Briefly, Leoric's growing madness abated from laughter. Deckard Cain. Honestly, this armor could definitely work its way into a lot of builds, and on top of that, it might actually be best in slot for some builds as well, depending on how you have your character set up. If you're able to keep your Dark Shroud active permanently, depending on your cooldown reduction, of course, and various other things. But a solid piece of equipment nonetheless. If you're looking to get your hands on this, you can always check out the target farming tool that we have on Diablo 4.life. And over here we've got the Rogue, and then we can click on the Shroud of Khanduras, and you'll see that it comes from the Fell Council, which is, of course, the Infernal Hordes. And I can't remember if there's any other place that this drops. Pretty much all of these items, by the way, for the most part, will come from like random drops as well. I was actually surprised to find out that the items come from random drops, and I thought that the new ones would that wouldn't drop from anywhere except for the Infernal Hells, because I thought they were gonna like set it up where you had to go there and you had to get the item from that specific place. But it does seem like you could still get them with randomized loot and things like that as well, which is just fine. The real sort of like crux here is that you might not want to get one that has the evade cooldown at like 9 seconds. The Dark Shroud ranks, I think, are pretty important as well. And then I don't really know about the rest of it, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the evading Dark Shroud leaves behind an explosion. It's kind of neat, and it pulls enemies in. But you don't necessarily need damage on that to get the effect of the pull-in, which is really nice. So just having that pull-in, that free pull-in that you can use at various times, is going to be useful no matter what. It could also be interesting, instead of going with like a max evade charges, you could try going for something that's reduced cooldowns, per attack, since it's going to increase the duration or the cooldown of your evades. I don't know. Honestly, I think a lot of people are probably using this season. I could totally see that. And I'm considering using it myself over tier. I just need to fix my resistances issues. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me for these fun little videos. I'd love to hear what you guys think of this armor, whether you think it's good, whether you think it's bad. And if you enjoy the videos, be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button. And as always, keep watching.